at the moment. My question really to you is when we were discussing this whole concept of cooperation and partnership in the post-COVID era, you had talked about how partnership is transforming internally as well in terms of internal comms and of course external comms. Could you share your perspective on that?
Sure. So I think a couple of very interesting things happened during the pandemic. First for organizations, and this is very thrilling for comms professionals. Communications actually became mainstream, in the sense that communications wasn't something that they were doing on the side of an announcement, or just to declare a win. It actually became mainstream in terms of collaborating with the entire business on how do we communicate about pandemic and other things. To our employees, to our partners, to policymakers. And in that way, I think the entire ecosystem in terms of internal collaboration really came together with respect to comms. Like I have never, I switched organizations during the pandemic, and in both the organizations, I've never sort of received so many business emails and calls about wanting to work with the comms team to convey a message that is business critical, either to clients or to employees or to partners. So I think this was really like communications came really in the spotlight, and the internal collaboration sort of really increased during the pandemic. The other interesting bit that I realized again in both my orgs was that that collaboration within the comms teams of various regions, and in large organizations, it's very true that there are often comms silos, as we know that regional teams work a little differently, or on their own tangent from each other. But that sort of also, those boundaries also blurred during the pandemic. We collaborated very, very effectively with global comms teams. The external communications, Jen made a very good point that eventually it all became about success, about partners or slash client success. In fact, I think the willingness of clients and partners to do comms and take them out to the media or to social channels and other owned channels I actually saw an increase in that willingness. A lot of, because eventually the message became about how is everybody managing the pandemic for their employees and for their end users, and that sort of increased collaboration within brands as such. So great time, honestly, for collaboration and partnerships.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Mrunmay to take up a point specifically about a little bit about business insights and business asks, like Meg pointed out. Mrunmay, coming to the fact that in a country like India specifically, voice has been such a big boom, really. It's been boom time for voice and voice devices. I use Alexa regularly, so definitely convert out there. So how do you see the application of voice in partnerships as well as in creating modern communication?
Thanks for the question, Parul. As said by the previous panelists as well, the pandemic has definitely changed the way we communicate and forced us to look at things more differently, get even better at communications. And it was the same when I'm working with the Alexa and devices team as well. To give you a very specific example, a business as usual would be people using Alexa or the other Amazon devices as for entertainment and so on. But the pandemic changed people's habits. We stayed at home for longer periods. So we saw people were engaging more with the devices. COVID was new. In the first wave, for example, everybody had so many questions and doubts, how it impacts, what are the symptoms, what should I do? So we saw a lot of health related queries coming on devices. At the same time, we saw people were trying to find out ways to engage with their kids at home, because with so much of time, schools were closed. So we saw a lot of increase in engagement about kids related experiences. So these were just insights what's happening on ground with customers. And this forced us to think about how this was a time to make the service even more useful for customers. So that's where internal and external partnerships came into play. So for example, we partnered with MyUpchar, which is a Indian portal which gives information about health related questions in Hindi. So you can ask about, what if I have a stomach pain, what should I do? Or what are the symptoms for COVID and so on. So we partnered with companies like Map My India, which has one of the best location-based information. So people could get questions like, where are the vaccination centers? Similarly, we try to work internally as well with different domains to find out how we can make the service more useful for customers. I think it was a great example of how brands have realized that Alexa can also be a medium for them to engage with customers. So I think it was definitely learning, and the teams rose up to the occasion by thinking customer backwards and building towards that.
That's really interesting to know. Definitely, I know that, and it's really nice to see at some point what does the applications look like in fintech, because a lot of people from a certain strata, economic strata, are very hesitant to go to banks. So actually, being able to do that on voice is extremely empowering for them. I hope to find out more about such applications as well at later in the conversation. I'd like to bring in Sunita. Sunita, when we were talking before this whole panel was set up, you mentioned how international messaging is becoming, the concept of global messaging really came into play during COVID, and having messages which are perhaps region friendly, but also very consistent throughout. So, what was the experience with that, and what does that tell you about the ability of companies to partner within their teams?
Yeah, thank you, Parul, for that question. At Walmart, we actually operate as one global tech team because our goals are similar. We want to attract, the greatest of talent. We want to retain the greatest of talent. So for us, since we were actually marching towards very common goals, the entire process of narrative for us, be it in the US, which could be Sunnyvale, Bentonville, or here in India, it took a very seamless turn in terms of how we wanted to talk to our associates. Some of the examples that I can talk about, Parul, here is every year we do a brand perception audit, which actually measures where we are in terms of our competitors. And this year, just during the pandemic, we did the exercise together to understand, hey, what's working well for us globally as a message narrative and what is working well for us here in India. And we are actually working together to kind of make sure that the recommendations, the way forward is actually looked at it very much from a global lens. The other example that I can talk about is just when COVID happened, we all struggled to work, right? There was a lot of learning to be on Zoom. There was a lot of unlearning to actually come out of it when we were looking at the whole hybrid model of working. So for us, we worked together on a project which is called Tech Forward, where we did a lot of focus group studies. We did a lot of surveys to understand what do associates, feel about coming back to work, be it globally. And we're still working on it. There is a lot of learning experience for us. So each of these projects that we have actually undertaken has been very much with a global lens. So another example that I can talk about is just about last year, we hosted a very big tech event for a Walmart Global Tech, where we really wanted to establish the brand as a retail tech company. And the way how we went about it, be it in India, be it in global, inviting the global speakers, inviting even the target audience, which seamlessly became very location agnostic. So many such examples actually, Parul, for us. But what's important is that how teams are actually working together to hone each other's skills and competencies to march towards a common goal, wherever be the location. I think that was one of our biggest learning.
Thank you, Sunita. I'd like to take the conversation over to Minol now. Minol, given the specific mandate that you have regarding customer and loyalty, and with real estate, which is always challenging in terms of in India at least, it's always a challenging thing to win the trust of customers for real estate. So, how much does this whole partnership piece resonate with you? Because given the fact that customers are now increasingly saying that show us your social conscience, they want to see that the product should be good. That's a given. But what about your heart? Where is that at? Given these in mind, what is your perspective, Manoj?
A great question, and you hit the nail on the head when you said that it is a difficult product. While everyone buys a home, there's a wide choice of homes, and historically, maybe all the information about real estate was not accessible to people. But it's in the last 7 years, everything has changed, and that's where the utilization of tech really comes into the picture. And while I might not strictly be doing comms right now, people will forget what we say, people will forget what we read, but people will never forget how we make them feel. So, and that's where communication plays such a big role, even in driving customer experience, not just for real estate or for any product. The use of tech has been, I think, a pivotal point for real estate, especially during the pandemic, Parul, because a home is such a touch and feel product, right? It's not something that one can buy online or exchange if it doesn't fit. It's something that you visit 6 or 7 times before you actually make your decision. It's one of the largest financial decisions that one makes in their life. It's buying a home. uh, but what we saw that actually customers were ready when the pandemic hit, and even work from home took on such a large role in India, which was not probably a country where work from home played a very large part. They took to tech very easily, and I think that's where human beings are so adaptable. We adapted, right? People started buying their homes online, and it also gives us as a brand, Purvanka, it gives us a choice to, and also the empowers us to use tech in a positive manner, right? That's because here is an opportunity for the brand to build a direct relationship with the client. That here I am, this is my social media, these are my channels, this is what I do. And one thing is obviously trying to build loyalty through purpose, right? That's the whole game. That while there is so much choice for the customer out there, I can only build loyalty if I'm differentiating myself. And I'm 2 3 very quick examples is one of our sustainability drives is water conservation. Purvankara does it on a very large perspective, and we were able to make little short videos of how we're doing it and put it up on our social media. The engagement levels, from existing customers or even probably customers who are trying to choose between us and 2 or 3 other brands, it makes a difference. So if we are able to establish the ambition of the brand, and what actions we are taking, and our accountability, I think those kind of things using tech makes it very easy, or makes it easier for a brand to gain loyalty. That's the way I see it.
Thank you. It's always fascinating to me how you approach real estate. It's really modernizing how people perceive real estate. They're using a lot of tech. Coming to Mehak, Mehak, what do you see as the key trends? What we are calling right now the post-truth world, so to speak. What are the key PR challenges and trends that you see?
I think one of the biggest ones is how for brands, one of the bigger ones is how do they take their narratives slash stories effectively, not only to the media but to the entire world. There's no one in this age, especially with social media. There's no one version of truth, but that's something that hurts brands, because when they tell their truth, it's not universally accepted or even maligned or tampered with in a lot of ways. That I think is a huge challenge on how we get people to trust brands on their own channels. I think that's where own channel storytelling plays a huge role in terms of establishing your brand as a trusted voice in the face of adverse news. Is something that I was dealing with contextually today. There's a big news about Google today, and we're trying to figure, and one of the constant things that the comms teams try to figure out is will the media trust our narrative, and if yes, how? What is the best way to take it to them in a way that sounds reliable, transparent, trustworthy? So that I think is one. The second biggest challenge, I think, and that is more in relation with employees, and I think somebody did mention it, that a lot of employees prefer a hybrid / remote work environment. The workforce dynamics have changed entirely since the pandemic happened. Corps, on the other hand, are taking a more careful path where they want people to come back to offices, and that's resulted in two different us versus them narratives. I think that's where comms comes in, to unify that, with the expectations of the brand as a whole versus the expectations of employees. That I think will be a very big challenge as workplaces again start to open, and we see this mass exodus of employees, and how do we stitch that in the brand's voice and position the brand as a fine balance of business and human voice. So those two, I think, will really impact comms in the coming years.
Actually, that's really interesting to know, because we also have the Elon Musk example, who said show up for work or lose your job, but he of course doesn't have a PR team. Perhaps he should think of hiring them back.
I agree.
So that is something which is extremely interesting that you pointed that out. I'd like Sunita and Runmay to share their views as well on what kind of challenges in communication do you see, and which would specifically benefit from partnership in messaging. Perhaps Sunita could go first, and then Runmay.
Thank you. Just adding on to what Mehak said, right? I think the biggest challenge for us, what we're dealing today, is drafting or communicating leadership messages. And when you look at the entire audience, which has really moved to, looking at very simple communication, very to the point communication. Nobody has the time to read like beyond 4 lines. I think that's where communicators playing the role of coaches to help leaders understand how do you get that mind space of just like 30 seconds, and that's when you need to catch attention of people. I think the other trend that I'm actually struggling with is the whole change of LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn is a very, very important platform for us. We are here in India only to attract and retain talent. So our storytelling, our narrative is very important, and only from a LinkedIn platform. I'm just sharing this example is there was professional communication to now it's gone very, very personal. And what's trending is sometimes you don't even anticipate like, hey, this is going to trend versus, really giving advice, which is more social media metric based to your organization or to your leaders. I think these are the two things which I feel for us, as communicators, is to be very agile, to be really seeing what's happening in the industry and adapting, talking to each other and figuring out, hey, what worked for you, what's not working for you, what can I learn from, your experience, I think is very important today. I don't think I communicated the way how I'm communicating today before COVID. I mean, things have really changed. Today, I have to make sure that the well-being of my, team is great. I'm making sure that, the power of partnership is just not business, but it is also at home. I have to make sure that, I'm partnering enough with my kids so that they understand, what are like the norms of working and things like that.
Thanks, Sunita. Runmay, how do you see the role of partnerships in tech PR, which is so specific?
I think like Sunita and Mehak both chimed in, the different types of tools we communicate with customers has changed now. It's not just traditional media. Customers are now getting information about brands, products, services, etc., from a variety of channels. As more and more Indians go online, the importance, like, we just don't have one Instagram or one Facebook, right? We have Indian version of TikTok. There are even more hyper local apps for engagement where customers are getting to know more about brands and services. I think the challenges, and so with COVID, with increased adoption of technology, the challenge for communicators is that how we leverage all these different channels. So from just the one traditional way of engaging with media, we're now thinking of own channels, like Meg pointed out. There's nothing like your own blog or your own Amazon social media channels, where that can be the source of truth for everything about the brand, and you have to leverage it smartly. It's your page. You can decide what narrative you want to talk, unlike a publication where a journalist or the editor has a say in how they want to communicate. about your brand to their readers. Then second is we partner with a lot of third-party influencers. Jen talked about using social media and influencers. That has also become extremely important now. For example, I'm in the space for Amazon devices. For us, it's very important for us to educate customers about what they can do with the devices in order to for continued engagement. And there's always so much to learn. You don't want them to just limit them to one or two use cases. So while media is very hardware focused, we work with content creators on different platforms to just create content about how they can use Alexa or devices in their daily life in their own context. So different people have different lifestyles and different usage of Alexa, but that becomes another effective tool for their followers to get to know what they can do with devices. And finally, about using employees. I think we speak about employees, but they are our biggest evangelists, whether it's company policies, what the brand feels, what the brand stands for. There's no better evangelist for word of mouth than your own employees. So keeping them informed, educated as much as we do media is very essential. I think these are the three part things we've tried to imbibe more in our communications program as we go forward.
Thank you, Mrinmay. Personally, I'm very fond of the calendar, feature of Alexa where it reads out your appointments. I absolutely love that. It just keeps you very much on rounded. And I have a question for Minol. Then I would like to request Jen and Glenn for specific comments. Minol, I just wanted to ask you about customer loyalty and how difficult or easy do you think it is at this point in time post COVID? We are also at a phase where real estate is kind of the prices are depressed as well at the moment. But given that kind of situation where buying may have actually increased, how do you see customer loyalty evolving post COVID?
The way I see it, Parul, and also, customers expect more from the brands they support. It's like family, right? With our family and friends, we have higher expectations and we set them to different standards. So I think customers also are holding the brands that they support and they barrack to higher standards. So I think the biggest challenge for loyalty will be to keep that customer engagement on, and how does one do it? And also for a product like real estate where repurchase may be once or twice max, you're looking, but it's also the longest customer life cycle from the time somebody comes to see the apartment for the first time or comes to see the house for the first time to the actual buying to the actual staying in. It's one of the longest customer life cycles. So I think there's a great opportunity there to not just of course, there is a personal touch and everything, but also to use technology to keep that constant engagement, because you're not just anticipating customer needs today. You are actually trying to identify what it would be 2 or 3 years later when they actually get their home. So that active listening will be a very important part to ensure customer loyalty. Of course, most brands, most companies have loyalty programs. Your local milk and bread shop has a loyalty program. So how are you going to ensure that the loyalty is not just about the monetary gain, but the loyalty is also in terms of the actual feeling that the customer has for the brand? And I really liked what Jen said earlier today is about making the customer or making the partner a part of the storytelling and not just the audience. And for us, print was always very generous to real estate, Parul, as you know. It's the second largest employer in India. Print media has always been very generous, but even the real estate as a sector is learning to pivot. They're learning that their customers want to see them online. How do you look for a home these days? You're going to get online and you're going to search the name. So technology is going to be a differentiator for brand loyalty. I see it like that. Communication, constant and active communication is going to be a huge process here. And also, one of the most important things is that brand resonance is one of the biggest drivers of loyalty. So if you can keep yourself relevant, if you can keep yourself top of mind and bring your storytelling to a process in all aspects, because I've been fortunate enough to work on and off comms, I do see how communication can actually go across all layers and make a huge impact. Indulge me with a 30-second story. We had curated a customer experience event. It was a small intimate event, and we had a art professor curate a couple of pieces and talk about the art. And about an hour after the event was over and people were browsing the pictures, I saw this young man hold his 6-month-old daughter to a painting and talk to her about it, and he was describing the painting to his daughter. Fortunately, we captured that moment, and we shared it with him post the event, and that's it. Now we've made him a part of our story, and he's a part of our brand, and that partnership will go a longer way and will drive loyalty. So I'll stop talking now. Thanks for the question, Parul.
Tohina, do you have any last comments before we wind up?
I was just curious about, the amount of opportunity that we have today, and it's great to hear from peers to see that we are all on the same path. But let's say, in a post COVID world where the media landscape has changed a lot, how do we leverage each other's brand to make the world much bigger opportunity? And collaborate as communicators? What kind of, if there were three things we could do together, or even one thing in the next 6 months together, that will move the needle? It'd be great to see if we have any place we want to collaborate more.
That is indeed a great note to end this entire conversation on. Thank you so much, all of you. My personal takeaway from this is that not only is partnership good for the company in terms of business and customer engagement, but certainly it's good for communication. I think the examples which Asim showed us really struck me that it makes for better storytelling. It makes for an ability to cut through the COVID haze which surrounds media right now, and it really brings storytelling to another level because of the level of nuances you can bring in because of the fact that you have many partners in the story. So with that, I'd like to thank our audience for joining in. If you still have questions, you can send them to me offline. And thank you to all the speakers, Manol, Sunita, Runme, Mehek, Jennifer, Glenn. So happy to be able to speak to you. Thank you, IBM and Weber, for putting this together and giving PR Moment the opportunity for this very interesting conversation. Thank you to Reena, the Weber team, Valerie, Priyanka. Thank you to my team, Samya, who's done a great job behind the scene. Pritha, thank you so much, all of you.